A Visceral Aesthetic, Reimagining Opera. Jenny Sealey in conversation with Joanne Roughton-Arnold, part of Tête, the Opera Festival 2020, brought to you by formidAbility and Graeae and supported using public funding by Arts Council England. Can I just say thank you very much, Jenny, for agreeing to interview me about formidAbility and our new opera. It's wonderful to meet you.
And it's lovely to meet you. And can I just take this opportunity to introduce my two interpreters, Jude, Mahon and Vikki. And for the sake of this, they'll sign when you speak and they'll sign when I speak. And when they're not on, they'll come off the picture. So sometimes you'll see all four of us and sometimes just the three of us. That makes any sense. Let's just see how we go. So, Vikki, I think Jude's going first. So Vikki, you can go. She's gone. So how do you want to work this? I've got a million questions and I don't quite know how to start.
Ask away, wherever instinct takes you.
So, how did you set up? What propelled you to set up formidAbility?
Well, for the last 2 years or so, I have been singing with the British Para Orchestra. And there's one particular show that we do called The Nature of Why, which is like a giant musical hug. And I love singing in that show so much, and I love seeing the audience reaction and the way the Para Orchestra has made concert music so much more accessible for disabled audiences and bringing disabled musicians together on an equal footing with non-disabled musicians. And I just found that so inspirational that I thought, why can't we do that in opera? And then I thought, well, of course we can. So I started formidAbility with a dear friend of mine, Holly Matheson, with the idea of creating a company where we have a healthy mix of disabled and non-disabled artists on stage. It's all about creating great work. And the other side of it is that we want to make accessibility elements for the audience really exciting and creative in their own right, so that actually they become something that the whole audience gets something out of, and it adds to the experience for everybody. So it's all about bringing people together and not and getting rid of barriers and all sorts of places.
I saw what's it called, the question of why? No, if I got that
The
wrong,
nature of why.
the nature of why. I saw that in Brighton. It was quite a small stage, wasn't it? So it felt a little bit cluttered. But what I did love as a deaf person, being right by, the violinist or percussionist, was like, oh my goodness, you could feel, it has that real visceral, just wonderful. So, but with everything, how we work together to investigate what is access, we need to think about all those different layers, don't we? And that one for me, because of the captioning was on one side, I just chose to sort of like not look at it because I wanted to be in amongst the music, in amongst the dancers. And it made me think a lot about that proximity would be really useful. Well, it is really useful for deaf blind audience members as well.
Yes. And certainly last year, that was a topic that came up in conversation briefly in our research and development for our first production, was at some point, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to put on an opera where some of the audience, particularly I'm thinking of deaf audience members, could be so close to a singer that they feel something of the vibrations.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a massive myth that there are obviously, of course, the real grassroots deaf who of music has absolutely no relevance. It's never going to be their thing for very obvious reasons. But there are a lot of deaf people who do really connect with music. And some of that is about the, just feeling it. But with technology and hearing aids and different sort of microphones, we have better access to music. We might not be able to hear every note or every word, um, but music is something that is in our world. How we make it completely accessible, or I suppose I'm wondering what your thoughts are around, you know, the different levels of access for a deaf audience. Some of it's about the feeling of it, some of it's about the words, but it's about rhythms and notes, and that's a bit tougher.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And it's about telling the story too, isn't it? Particularly in a theatrical setting where and I'm thinking of an opera, where the whole thing is at the point is to get a story across to the audience in whatever means using whatever layers that are at our disposal. So I'm thinking about ways in opera that we could find new layers to add. And so this is why for our new production, we're in our research and development phase that we're going to go into in September. The experiment that we're going to do is going to involve an artist painting live on stage. And I'm curious to see, can we get an artist to paint fast enough and that he or she can put across something of what's happening.
Are you working with Rachel Gaddison?
No, we're actually on the lookout for an artist at the moment. So fire me any links you can. We had one in
Rachel
mind.
Gaddison is the most extraordinary performance painter, and she works a lot with Deaf Men Dance,
Right.
a very small dance company, deaf led and deaf men. And so she painted as the three men danced. She is
Amazing.
phenomenal. I strongly suggest you get in touch with her.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can paint fast. And she's an artist and a performance artist, so you
Yeah.
know her aesthetics of performance is fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
The eight artists we were hoping to have lives in Australia, and she was planning to be in the UK in the autumn, but she is shielding for health reasons. So of course it's not a
You're in
sensible.
Australia, aren't you?
No, I'm a New Zealander, but
New Zealand.
yeah,
Okay, so you can't. So where your R&D is happening in
in London.
Australia?
No, in London.
You are massively international, aren't you? I need to. Yes, that's what I was trying to do when I was going through your website, trying to work out where you all are at. Okay.
So I've been living in the UK for quite a long time now. So formidAbility is based here. It's just that the artist
Okay.
we were going to use lives in Australia and has had to make the very sad decision that she can't be over here in the autumn. However, there are, things work out, doors open in surprising ways. Like you've just given me this wonderful name, so I'm excited by that. Thank you. Yeah.
There's something about not everyone receives information through speaking or signing or singing or movement. Some people receive their information through looking at drawing. Thinking about all those conferences where they have someone taking an animation, an animated version of all the discussions rather than just endless notes. That is a much clearer picture of the whole conference than, a paper.
Yeah.
And I think, with this whole pandemic, we're in Zoom land, we're on digital landscapes. So our visuals are changing. Do you know what I mean? So how we learn, how we retain information may also change. So I think that idea of having it drawn, oh, love it.
Thank you.
What other things are, what are the other elements of things you've got up your sleeve that you're playing around with this new opera?
Well, it's all very new, so we haven't got very far down our thoughts of precisely how we're going to stage it and so on. And we're only going to have 5 days of R&D in September to put together the first act and then present it to a small audience. And of course, I really, really would like to have some deaf people there to give us feedback. So please come, Jenny, if you are free. I'll let you know when and where. You would be very, very welcome. What we're doing at the moment is just thinking about the overall how it's going to be, because the libretto for the first act arrived in my inbox about 3 days ago, which got me extremely excited, because originally when I spoke to our fabulous librettist Hafsa Anila Bashir, I asked her to write us something that resonates with everything we've all been going through during this really strange, difficult time. And originally she thought she would write a series of unrelated vignettes looking at little different events that have been happening from different perspectives, kind of reflecting the fact that our perspective depends on how the media report an event compared to how it might be if you were actually there. And then one of the events she was thinking about was, of course, the felling of Colston's statue in Bristol. And she thought maybe that would be the vignette for our R&D. And then she had one of those inspirational moments and she emailed me and she said, no, that is the opera. So the whole opera is going to be inspired by the felling of Colston's statue. And we're giving voice to a man called Pero, who came from Nevis in the 18th century, was brought there to Bristol as a slave. And apparently there is a bridge in Bristol named after him. And this has all come to light after Hafsa thought of the title, The Bridge Between Breaths, for the opera. So it's all, the breath came from her idea of her thought that at the moment it feels like the world is caught between the inhale and the exhale, which I thought was a beautiful, beautiful thought. And then it kind of went from there and it evolved into what it's become now, this opera about Colston's statue coming down and giving this man a voice, Pero, who didn't have a voice. So the first act is going to be set in Bristol in the 18th century with Pero very much at the centre of it all. And there's going to be an offstage spirit singing a refrain that will sort of weave through, which is to do with the breath and the space between the breastbone and the heart. And I just thought her words are so beautiful. I can't wait to sing them. I can't wait to see what Gareth, or hear and explore the composer's sound world that he creates.
How brilliant to be in the situation of something that is so now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to be able to really take on Black Lives Matter and cement that absolutely core to the work.
Yeah. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I mean, it was a moment when that statue just went,
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And then my thought process after that was like, oh my God, there are hundreds of statues across the country of men, you know, slave owners, and so we are, you know, at that moment in time redefining how we have to look at those statues or whether they can be gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also think it's weird. We've got a project called Transforming Leadership, and the original title of it was called Breathe, and then COVID-19 happened, and we thought, no, we're not going to call it breathing. It was called Breathing Room. We're not going to call it Breathing Room anymore. So very quickly we came up with the name Beyond, but it's sort of that feels right because it is beyond all of this. But I think that thing about breathing, I mean, because the whole COVID thing is linked to, it's got, the layers of messages and everything you've just been describing, it's just like quite overwhelming, actually.
Absolutely. And when I read the blurb that Hafsa wrote, that is on our page on the website, and it was referring to the pain of breathing, I think was somewhere in there. I forget the exact words she used, but you know, the obvious links then with George Floyd, that just it all resonates so much. So you know, as I say, we're only in September, we're going to focus just on the first act, but I've seen a Hafsa sketch and for the second and third acts, and they are going to come into the present day and into the day that the statue came down. So yeah, it feels incredibly, I don't know, I can't find the right word. It's incredible to be creating art that is so reflective of something so recent.
Yeah. And I think because and linked to all of that is your ambition for access.
Yes.
Because I mean, I've been on about 3 million Zooms over the last 4 months, and it's quite frustrating, even before George Floyd terrible thing happened, the lack of awareness around the intersectionality of the deaf and disabled community is shocking. It's always diversity and disabled people, or Black and Asian people and disabled people. It's like, hang on a minute. There are Black and Asian, deaf and disabled people.
Yes.
They really are.
Yes.
And women and men and trans and non-binary. Come on, please.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I'm stuck record. But I think we're in a situation now which hopefully that will change for the good and the better. And that thing around accessibility is also, for me, feels really important, because there's been so much stuff out there online that's not been accessible. Nobody's thought about audio description, nobody's thought about captioning. And come on,
yeah,
please. So in a way, you're giving us access to a story that we need access to. We've got, you know what I'm trying to say? It feels access to all of this feels so important, because as a community, we're fed up of being left out of the access agenda, if you know what I mean.
I do, absolutely. And when you say about with intersectionality, that's something that has struck me too a lot. In particular, I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago for women in opera, and it was a wonderful feeling of wanting to create something better when we come out of all of this than we had before. And one of the speakers was a wonderful, wonderful opera singer who happens to be Black, and she spoke about her experience in the opera world. And the things she was describing resonated really strongly with me as a singer who happens to have a disability. And so I sent her a message afterwards and said, it's just, the intersectionality is incredible. You're different from different places, but we're experiencing the same things.
Victoria?
No, I do know Victoria very well. No, this was Gwyneth Anne Rand, who sings at the Royal Opera House and is just phenomenal. I've worked with her before, and wow, a wonderful, wonderful singer and an incredible human being.
That name.
Yeah. So I just feel like
the opera world has a reputation for, I mean, absolute elitism of, and you know, it is companies like yours and Tête and Graeae of trying to break down those barriers that opera has to be for everybody.
It does, absolutely. And yes, you know, opera singing is an incredibly elite skill, and it's, you know, at the vocal athleticism is phenomenal in order to create those sounds with a human voice with nothing else. But there's no reason why, you know, talent doesn't sort of not fall on disabled people, only fall on non-disabled people. Talent is universal, you know? And so we put the skill and we put the work in, and we can create great work. And you might be disabled, you might not be.
I was lucky enough to be in an R&D at the Royal Opera House. Vikki, who's signing now, Vikki was part of it, but I had Victoria, Okawari, Amelia, and some Royal Opera singers. And we just spent a week together, and it was with Lee Reynolds, who was leading it with me. I think his name Lee Reynolds. And we were building access and sign language into everything, and audio description, and it was amazing. But what was amazing was my reaction when, you know, just chatting to people, and then suddenly they start singing, and your head just goes, God, no idea that they have a voice in them. It's like, I mean, to this day, opera singers just, I mean, the skill I just love it. But what was interesting, particularly about that wig and the R&D that we've been doing with our Paradise Files about Teresa von Parody, blind composer in contemporary of Mozart's, was when we start giving opera singers signs, actual sign language, it really frees them up. Really throws them up, and because there is a staticness around so many different operas, and it can be quite boring, sorry, but it can be really boring to look at. It's like, oh, especially if you can't hear,
Yeah.
as well. So it's like, but this really animated them. And for Victoria, when we were working with her as a blind woman, she said, Jen, so often as a singer, I'm told just to put my hands down by my side because I've been blind for all my life. I have no visual reference of what gesture is.
Yeah.
But when she was signing, we sort of like supported her learning the sign, hand-on teaching of signing. She said the connection to her visual, really bespoke visual landscape in her head and her hands. She said, oh my God, I can now gesture. It has meaning. And of course, it never really occurred to me, if you don't have a reference of gesture, then of course you're going to be static.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
And like you see, a lot of blind people, if they haven't got a visual reference, a memory of having had vision, it's exactly that. That you offer the posture can be a little bit hunched or a little bit, because of course they're using their ears, so they're turning their head to listen and learning how to stand in a way on stage, like you'll be teaching Victoria to project out. And that's really wonderful. I've often thought it would be really great to do some kind of work like that, and I'm so glad that you're doing that with people.
But it's with sign language, because it's a real language, and it's the language of the words that they are singing. So there's a connection.
Yes.
So it made a lot of sense. And one of the things when you might think about the access for your deaf audience members is who's signing. Where is, if you have an interpreter, where are they?
Yeah.
And I always like to play with, it costs money though, I like to play with all hearing disabled actors prepared with a deaf performer, and that deaf performer signs the words and the hearing actor speaks the words, so each character has two people playing it, and it's a brilliant way of just getting rid of any ego, because you have to share.
Yeah.
Part.
Yeah.
But if I mean, that can be an expensive way of working. One of the things that Vikki and I discovered when Vikki was, signing with the opera is lip pattern is important. And some sign language interpreters choose not to use the lip pattern as much when they're interpreting opera because of those long,
yes.
I'm not even going to demonstrate, but you know what I'm saying. And so you might just feel a bit stupid trying to do that. So I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think, Vikki, we found it, because we're still just in R&D mode as well.
Yeah.
But how can you connect, the lip pattern, the sides, and when the thing there is that vibrato and elongated and repetition? How do we make sure that sign language has an equivalent form?
That's a really interesting question.
I have no idea what the answer is, but then you're going to play around with that, and then you're going to tell me how to steal all your ideas.
When we did our first production last year, which was a double bill of Hotspur by Gillian Whitehead and Schoenberg's iconic Pierrot Lunaire, we collaborated with sign dancers. So we had, for Hotspur, Hotspur is for one singer and an instrumental ensemble. So we had a dancer signing the libretto, but also dancing as my character's inner consciousness while I was playing the public face. And that meant that it all gelled and it was center stage. And in Pierrot Lunaire, we had a dancer playing Pierrot, the clown, while I did all Schoenberg's vocal gymnastics. But I got to interact with him as well, which was great because that piece is normally just a concert work. So we had this visual side, and to have Pierrot the clown flipping between melancholy and desperately sad and longing for home and being gruesome sometimes and threatening was wonderful. And I could change character as well from different characters that come up in the song cycle. So that was how we did the accessibility in that show. We had subtitles above the stage, but for Pierrot Lunaire, but only because it's in German. So we put the English translation up, and that was simply because that is standard practice, in an opera in a foreign language, to give the audience a translation.
One of the other standard practices with opera, I mean, captioning is really, really useful. Of course it is. And I remember doing loads and loads of work about 20 years ago with the English National Opera. I loved being at the ENO, but there was a group of us trying to champion subtitles, and they said, but we're singing in English. Yeah, but if you're deaf, we still need subtitles.
Yes.
But it's a very irritating thing that opera do. If something's being repeated, they don't put the repeat back up. So how am I to know it's being repeated?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because of course, if you're hearing, you'll realize it's the same coming back. But if you're not hearing it, of course you can't. You're just going to see these people doing something on stage that makes no sense.
And when I went to see, I think the Magic Flute, when they're talking in the middle of it, there's other third titles was at the Royal Opera House. Third title, oh brilliant, lovely, fab, I'm in heaven. And then all the talking happened, no access. So my best friend was just trying to sign. She's not a stage interpreter, just like, Jenny, I'm really sorry about this. Come on.
Yes.
So when you think about opera, I mean, it does have a certain appeal to a certain age bracket, and a lot of people in their older years do lose their hearing. So subtitles are useful for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you just got me on my soapbox.
No, that's fine. That's such a good point about needing to put the repeat up of text. I think that's really important, and I'm going to store that away and feed that back to people when I'm talking to them next.
What's your ambition for Bridge? Bridge 20. No, what's it? Bridge 20. No.
The Bridge Between Breaths.
That's a tongue twister, isn't it? The Bridge Between Breaths.
Yeah.
Or the Bridge Between Breaths.
At the moment, I'm finding it hard to think beyond September, but which is just the R&D. But the plan is that after that, the show, the Hafsa, the librettist, and Gareth, our composer, will finish writing the whole work by early November. And then I need to be looking at where we take it for its premiere of the whole full production, and obviously do a lot of fundraising. So whether that becomes something we do in London, whether, I don't know yet, whether Tête have another festival next year, it all depends on their funding situation, if we can do it there. I'm also thinking it's a show that needs to go to Bristol, because for obvious reasons, I think it would be wonderful, really wonderful to take it there. And beyond that, I don't know. I'd love it to tour. We're deliberately making it very portable, because there are only going to be 2 singers and 2 instrumentalists, a clarinetist and a cellist. So it's easy to take it to venues, and we don't need a piano. It should be very portable. And our artist, of course.
Bristol, Cardiff, Liverpool. All those ports of slavery. Yes.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah. important.
Yeah.
Have you considered the thought about it being an outdoor piece? Because, you know, the government have just released, you know, outdoor performance can happen. And I just, it's my big worry that the indoor ones may be a lot later opening up. So whether you've had any thought around that. But upper outdoors is difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult because of it for the acoustics. You start to need, you either need a setting which has a good natural acoustic, like a kind of a shell shape behind you that's going to bounce the sound
Yeah.
out, or you need an outdoor theatre, or you need to start thinking about amplification, especially with such small forces. Um, and then,
In terms of your thoughts around the accessibility, certainly for deaf people, are you thinking about having a sign language interpreter in the mix or creative captioning or both?
at the moment, I was not thinking about having a sign language interpreter during the show. I was thinking of I'm the question in the R&D is, does the artist provide enough with whatever is happening visually on stage to portray the story? I know it can never replace BSL, obviously not, because it can't be as precise. But thinking away the way art isn't always precise. You know, if you listen to music, or if you watch dance, there's the gesture tells the story, but you don't necessarily have detail information. What do you think? No?
I think that's a bit, it would give some access, but
Yeah.
really, I mean, you would really need to make sure it was captioned as well if you were having just gesture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are, I mean, you have the idea of you know, the painter or whatever. It's about, you know, captioning can be really beautifully visual. And there's
Yeah.
some fantastic people that we've worked with or I've seen, you know, think, oh my God, this captioning is just amazing.
So is it beyond just seeing the words, but making it visually
Oh
beautiful?
God, yeah. Oh yes. I mean, the first player I ever captioned, I did it with my colleague Claire Saddleton, and we just did it on PowerPoint. So when someone was shouting, we did big letters. We had all the characters with a different colour.
Uh-huh.
When it was poetry, we had a different font. So we played around with it, and this was talking about almost 15 years ago. But now people have just really, really clever around how I think captioning can work, and it links to the rhythm of the music. It can link to the space and the breathing of it all. It's well worth. I mean, I can try and get you some names of really good people who work in captioning AB.
Thank you. I would love that. Really would love that. Because then it also becomes something that's interesting for everybody because it looks interesting visually, you know?
If,
Um,
if it's embedded in the, you know, the minute you start having those creative conversations around design, the form, the flavour of it all, if that person is in that, it all becomes one cohesive creative endeavour rather than, oh, we've got to put some caption up there.
yeah.
And then the thing around how you think about audio description with opera is difficult. And
Yeah.
I mean, you may know more about that. I'm still learning about how you get audio description fitted in.
Yeah.
Because our opera, we've got all the audio descriptions sung and spoken, so it's live.
Yeah.
But that's not for every opera.
No, we did last year. We worked with a company called the Rationale Method. Nathan Gearing runs that, and he sent us a wonderful performance poet to be our audio describer. So she wrote a really beautiful script that was so descriptive in such an emotive way. So it's not just the dancer moved to the left, it's kind of how the dancer moved and what would the face look like and what did they do with their arm, and it's just really, really beautiful. So I'm keen to bring something like that in again.
What name? Sorry, Nathan Geary.
Nathan Gearing,
Nathan Geary.
yeah, the Rationale Method.
I, I've heard this name. This is the third time I've heard that name this week. Wow.
He's been putting some pictures up on social media, photos of Black Lives Matter protests with the most stunning audio description of the images.
I'm not on Facebook, so
Okay.
no, I'm one of these brave people that dares not be on Facebook.
Good for you.
Oh, but then I miss things like that.
Yeah.
But now I know from, you know, so I've been Googling, tap of the Google.
Yes, do. I mean, for the R&D in September, we are focusing purely on the idea of the artist being in the room. Um, and I would add the other accessibility elements later when we create the full production. But as you say, from the beginning, so they're at the heart of it and not tacked on at the end.
I do, but if artists know some of the creative endeavour that's in and around what you want to achieve, those conversations can happen on day one. They don't have to take over the whole conversation, but I'm a great believer in those things being sown right at the very beginning, so they stay on the agenda.
Yeah.
It's very easy for them just to, oh, that's on the last minute, boom. And if it's last minute, it's not satisfying for anybody, least of all the audience. So we keep it in the mix from day one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that sounded a bit preachy. I didn't mean to.
No.
What we do, but I just think it just helps. It helps keep that conversation going throughout.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, and that's what we with formidAbility, we're all about putting that accessibility at the heart of the creative process and not making it tacked on the end.
Can I ask one more question? Can I pop in into rehearsals?
I'm sure you
I've
can.
been on a massive learning journey around opera and how it's made and
Yeah.
the language around it. You know, I still feel really naive and I want to get better at that. So can I invite myself in if there's enough space to be socially distanced, of course?
Yeah, of course you can. We'd love to have you come in. Yes, we're needing to do some research at the moment now and think about finding the biggest space we can with the most well ventilated and high ceiling.
Graeae Theatre has, we're our company, we have a beautiful rehearsal space in Shoreditch.
Yeah.
And it has its own bathroom, and we were sorting out tea and coffee making facilities in there, so you don't have to use the whole building as a thoroughfare. It has its own door.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still writing up our COVID risk assessment, but you know, it's beautifully accessible and it's big, and we have a piano.
Thank you. That's great to know.
So you know,
yeah,
and we do mates rates.
Thank you. Okay.
just worth considering.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, yes. Oh, wonderful. I'll have a, is there something on your website showing the space or dimensions?
Yes, just look up www.graeae.org.
I will. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there should be one of those 360
Yeah,
whatevers. Yeah.
that's what we need to do. Yeah. And
It's a lovely space. But I suppose I need to ask Vikki. She was, Vikki, sorry, can I just ask you a direct question? What's the acoustics like for opera singing in our rehearsal room?
The feedback that I was, when I was talking to the opera singers, was all very positive.
Oh.
They said it was wonderful.
The sound quality is all right.
Mm.
Oh.
And of course you have the thick black tabs, curtains, that can change the sound as well. So depending on what you're aiming for.
that's great.
So our space is opera friendly.
Wonderful. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I think what we're all wanting to find out and waiting with bated breath is the results of the research the government's commissioned into how far away singers need to be from each other in order to be safe, because that's going to affect how big a space we need to be in and how we can move around. Although we only have 2 singers, so at least it's not like during a cast of thousands.
There's plenty of space in that room to be very, very distant.
That's great.
Very
And
good.
for bringing in an invited audience, a small invited audience, to keep them safe as well.
It would have to be a very small audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is part of what we're investigating at the moment, trying to work out how we can make the space work.
Yeah.
We have to make the space work because we need income. And it's just, we want, and we need it, the building needs to be alive as all these, it's not a theatre building, it's just a offices and a rehearsal room, but really, really lovely home. And it's right next to Hoxton Station.
Okay.
So, and it's lovely. So have a look on our website.
Well, thank you very, very much.
And I suppose, you know, can we keep a conversation going? Because like I say, you know, I'm still learning. And I'm, you know, as a company, we're always inquisitive about, you know, what are the new models and ways forward around accessibility and different forms of storytelling.
Absolutely.
And radical work, which is exactly what you are doing. So I feel like our connection hopefully will carry on.
I would love that. I'm absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So is there anything else that you feel we should chat about, or?
I suppose the only other thing that, I mean, last summer when we did our first production, it was, for me, the learning curve was like this. It was so steep because we were a new company trying to and breaking new ground and trying new things. And we learned a lot on the way. And one of the requests that came out of our Q&A after the first performance from our deaf audience members was to have a synopsis before the show to be available to them. And that's something that I've learned. We put it in our program, or it was already there, but you had to buy the program to get that. So I think knowing that we should put that online ahead.
I mean, this is why, I mean, it's good to have, you know, a written synopsis, but also it's really good to get a deaf person to do a grassroots BSL synopsis.
Right.
As well, and have both of those things on your website. Or, you know, at a venue, what we've always done for many, many years is we have a written synopsis, we have a easy read synopsis for learning disabled people, we have a tactile synopsis for visually impaired people, and audio description preamble,
yeah.
and a television monitor or, you know, computer screen with a BSL one. And a lot of venues now, when we supply the BSL synopsis, they'll have that up on their widescreens that they have in their cafes or whatever. So more audience become aware of sign language being an access tool and all the rest of it. So there are many, many, many good deaf people who are brilliant at doing synopsis, BSL synopsis.
That's such a good idea. Because as you say, it's also making the public aware that these things are available, and making the theatres be more proactive and making them visible to everybody.
Yeah.
So that people know to ask.
Yeah.
I think is key.
I mean, everyone's on a learning curve, and it's good. It's good to talk. Always good to talk.
It's really good to talk, and you know, and we're trying really hard to get to cover all the bases. But of course, there are things that might slip, and we need to learn from that, and be always open to hearing what people need.
I mean, the Graeae, we would not believe how many mistakes we have made in our time. Painful to think about them, but you know, it's about, you only learn something if you get it wrong. Not getting it wrong, or you just don't quite grasp what it needs to be. Because theatre is ever evolving, access is ever evolving, the aesthetics of it all are ever evolving. So it's always exciting. We're very lucky, aren't we, to have the jobs that we do and to be in the world that we live, work in.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Oh, thank you so much.
I'm more than excited about your new opera.
Thank you very much. I am
Vikki and Jude, we will be paying a visit to their R&D.
Yes, please. Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And I would, of course, when we do the R&D presentation at the end, and we're planning to have a Q&A with our invited audience, we will of course need to have a sign language interpreter there for that. So I'd be very interested to talk to you about how we can make that happen.
Well, let's continue conversations as we get near to September, and I'll update you about our rehearsal.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Okay, well, how lovely to do this. Thank you.
Really lovely. And thank you to both of our wonderful signers. That's just hugely appreciated.
What I have to do now, because I'm still a bit of a technophobe, I stop the recording, I wait for it to convert, and then I send it to you.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Wish me luck.
It will be a huge file because it's a video. So are you familiar with WeTransfer?
WeTransfer, yeah, that's the only one I know.
Me too.
I've been trying to practice Vimico and it just won't work for me. I pay for it and I can't make it work. Oh! That's why I think I'm a director and not an IT person. Okay, thank you, and Jude and Vikki, thank you both very much. And
thank you, Jude and Vikki. Is this thank you? Is this right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all.
With thanks to Jenny Sealey, CEO and Artistic Director of Graeae, Joanne Roughton-Arnold, Co-founder of formidAbility, Jude Mahon and Vikki G. Dare, Sign Language Interpreters. The Bridge Between Breaths, a new opera by Gareth Churchill, composer, and Hafsa Anila Bashir, librettist, commissioned by formidAbility and part of Tête, the Opera Festival 2020, supported using public funding by Arts Council England.